I've always been curious about the way things work. My parents are cancer researchers and scientists and medical doctors, and from as long as I can remember, that's been something that's very important to me is understanding how the world works. I've always wanted answers to those questions, and what I didn't like about religion in general is that I had answers, but they weren't good answers, and I knew that. I knew that they were insufficient. They were unsatisfying because they didn't make sense, even though I had an answer. What I love about science and empiricism and the scientific method in general is that it's okay to be honest and say we don't know the answer. It's nothing to be ashamed of. We're working on it. We've got the smartest people in the entire world working on it. But it's the most honest position that you can have about things that you don't know. It's just that simple. And I like that we're making progress, and we've made amazing progress the last couple of centuries especially, but the last couple thousand years too. And this is going in the right direction. But it's okay to say that you don't know the answer if you don't know the answer. It's better to do that and be honest with yourself and be honest with other people than to say this is the answer, and I know it's a stupid answer, and I know it sounds like a crazy answer. Maybe it's because it's a stupid answer and a crazy answer. The thing to understand is the Bible is not proof. The Bible is the claim that we're trying to prove. The Bible is on equal footing with any other ancient document. We have more copies of it than other ancient documents because it's been influential in Western history. But the important thing to note about that is more copies does not mean more true. It just means more influential. I mean, we have lots and lots of copies of Harry Potter. That doesn't make it more true. It just means that it's popular, and it's a logical fallacy. It's an argumentum ad populum to say it's true because it's popular. When we're trying to evaluate historical documents, it's important not to just read them themselves. On the blog, I wrote an article once about this, giving an example of a friend of mine once took me to a lecture on anemia. Anemia, I know nothing about. I know it's a blood disorder. That's it. I know a little bit more now because I went to this lecture. But if I were to read a textbook on anemia, I would be in absolutely no position to say that these things about anemia are true or false. I am not an expert in that field. The way that we know if these things written in this textbook are true or false is by going out and doing research, by testing what it says, and by looking at the evidence and seeing if it matches. You can't just read the book and then say that you know the answer to these questions unless you are already an expert in that and you're comparing it to real world things. It's the same with the Bible. If you read just the Bible, you're in no position to say whether what it says is true or not. You also have to go out and do archaeology and compare it with other sources from secular writers and from unbiased people or people who were antagonistic to those views. Other historians, I mentioned archaeological evidence. You have to see if it actually matches up with what we find in the world. And when you do that with the Bible, you find out very quickly that it doesn't really match up any better than the Quran matches up or the Book of Mormon matches up. It's just not there. And I think, the fundamental problem with saying it's true because it's in the Bible is that's a circular argument. It's the Bible is what you're trying to prove. The Bible is not the proof. 21-year-old Dave. Wow. I was an evangelical Christian worship musician at the time. That was my job. That's what I did. Preach to people. I was completely convinced that this stuff was true. I would want to tell myself the answers that you have that you know aren't satisfying, say that out loud. It's not as scary once you've said it out loud that these answers aren't satisfying. Go look for answers. James Luther Adams, the Harvard theologian and professor from their divinity school, said something just brilliant about this. I want to make sure I get the quote right. God doesn't want unexamined faith, I believe is how he put it. And I think that's really important. God doesn't want you, not that I believe that there is one anyway, but you don't believe just because you were told to believe or because it makes you comfortable or because you're scared of not believing. Believe because you have good reasons and because the evidence supports what you're saying. And if you look for the evidence and if you look at the reasons, I cannot imagine that you will see that they are good or there. That's what happened to me, 4 years later when I went through that process, when I started looking for reasons to back up what I believed, and I found out that there weren't any, or at the least, that the reasons that I thought were good were actually no better than the reasons that people from every other religion give for why they believe what they believe. And if you can't say this belief has more backing than this other belief, then you're in no position to believe one over the other. And the most honest thing that you can do is say, I'm going to reserve judgment until I have more information. And that's why I call myself now an agnostic atheist. I am not saying that there is no God, and I would never say that because I'm not in a position to know that. But I am saying there is no evidence that is persuasive to me that any God exists. And I'm continuing to look for that evidence. I have not found anything convincing or even close to convincing. But the important part is that this whole thing is a journey, and you're always searching, and you never stop doing that. Curiosity is what makes humankind different and amazing. And that's something that we should cultivate and be proud of. But we cut ourselves off by saying we found the answer. We haven't found the answer. And I would encourage myself at 21 to embrace that idea that it's okay to look, and it's okay to question, and it's okay to doubt, and that means you're being honest, and that means you're doing it right. And remember, we are atheism.